Welcome to Careful Consideration of Our Common Concerns. I'm Dr. Ted Noel. Thank you for joining us. It's April 6th, and this is our update today. And we have several things to cover, the first of which is news on vaccines. Finally, the Centers for Disease Control decided they would admit that if you've been vaccinated, you can't get the bug and you can't give anybody else the bug. They just have had such a hard time admitting that that was the whole point of being vaccinated in the first place. So let's be thankful that they finally woke up to that, even though they're throwing around all kinds of fear-mongering about variants and whatnot, and we talked about those last time. But let's also add one key point. There was a large study in Wuhan province. Now notice this is a study. This is not something released by the Chinese Communist Party or the World Health Organization. This is a study looking at millions of people in Wuhan and showing that asymptomatic people just don't spread the bug. So we're safe. If you've had the shot, go about your business, forget about masks, and remind people if they ask you that you've been shot, you can't get it, you can't spread it, you're safe. Now, our next item, again, is from the CDC, and they keep trying to tell us that masks work. And they point to a couple of studies, but most of the studies simply don't say that. And you run into a real problem here. Lots of times in medicine, you will have studies that contradict each other. Anyone who has followed the issue of estrogen in postmenopausal females will understand this, because for a while it was give estrogen, then it was don't give estrogen, then it's give estrogen, and it's back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. The studies seem to contradict each other. Sometimes the studies aren't done real well. Sometimes the studies have what we call confounding factors. And I'll talk about that in a second. But we also have to notice, for example, studies have something called a p-value. Now, this is a statistics term that describes the probability that the answer this study got is actually meaningful. And for example, we had a study looking at masking versus non-masking, which showed that the probability that masking did any good was only 17%. It was 83% probability that any difference between the two legs of the study was purely by chance. The p-value was 0.87. And generally speaking, we want a p-value less than 0.05 that says we are 95% confident that what we measured was real. Notice that doesn't say 100%, it just means 95%. And then when somebody else does it from a different angle and somebody else does it from a different angle, you get all those confirmations together. We can be really confident that something is real. But confounding factors. Well, we have one group wore masks and one didn't, and this group got less. Could it be that the people who wore masks were socially distancing more? Now, you know I don't like social distancing. I think it's mostly garbage. But were they staying away from people who had the bug? Or they had family members with the bug and they were carefully isolating them from the public so they weren't spreading anything? You know, those are called confounding factors. And until you resolve those confounding factors, even with good statistics, you don't know if you know anything. And the CDC keeps pushing mask studies when, in fact, Dr. Scott Atlas, Dr. John Ioannidis, and on, people who know what they're doing are sitting here saying, we have no data that masks do any good. And as I said last time, you either have a mask that gives you a great filter, but it takes so much work to breathe through it that you breathe around it, or you have that nice, easy-to-breathe-through mask made out of the bandana or something else. It doesn't filter with a crap. So those are your choices. It either doesn't work or it doesn't work. Let's go on. And flip-flopping Fauci, as I said last time, he flip-flops worse than a fresh-caught fish on deck. But this time, the Fauci news is, in an interview, he claims that his decision to develop the vaccine was the best decision he'd ever made. His decision. I, Anthony Fauci, am God. I created the vaccine. Well, Dr. Scott Atlas, who was in the room, says, "'Tain't so. It was President Trump's decision to push all of the red tape out of the way, to allow the vaccine to go, to create Operation Warp Speed, where he says, we're going to get funding for these people, we're going to get all of the vials prepared, we're going to have all of this other stuff ready to go. All we need is labels and some proof that it works, and we can zip it out the door quick. You know, they got all the contracts in place. Fauci had nothing to do with it, including... Fauci was actually opposed to it. He says, no, it's going to take a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years. And remember, that's a bureaucrat's dream. As long as the problem is still there, the bureaucrat's useful. And he wants his 15 minutes of fame to go to 15 months and then maybe 15 years. Who knows? He wants his own personal fame. And so he's willing to claim he's responsible for something he didn't even do. Time to shift gears. President Biden, oh, how I hate that sound, is trying to push a corporate tax increase. The idea is he wants to pay for his variation on an infrastructure plan and a Green New Deal and, you know, whatever wish list item he wants to do. He claims it'll raise $2 trillion. We go from 21% corporate tax to 28% corporate tax, and it's going to bring in all of this money. There is a key problem with this. I mean, this is a key problem, and that is that corporations do not pay taxes. You heard me right. Corporations do not pay taxes. I know IBM writes a check to the government. Ford writes a check to the government. Coca-Cola writes a check to the government. But, you know, that $1 item you bought from Coca-Cola includes the 21% tax, and if the tax goes up to 28%, guess what? It's going to cost you $1.07. Or let's put it in other terms. Let's say we had a low-end car from Ford at $20,000, just to pick a round number. And we go, the 21% tax is included in it, but now you bump the tax up to 28%. 7% more comes out of your wallet. The price of that car goes up $1,400. Oh, the amount of your stimulus check. And that goes straight back to Uncle Sugar. Now, Ford can reduce the price a little bit. They'll send more of the car manufacturing to Mexico, so it costs a little less. They make sure that its employees on the assembly line don't get raises for an extra year. You know, there's a whole bunch of things they can do to cut their expenses here, cut their expenses there. Only make the high margin cars like a Mustang. Don't make the low margin cars. You know, there's a lot of things they can do, but ultimately you pay the tax. Ford collects it, and they write a check to Uncle Sugar. Remember that Donald Trump dropped our corporate taxes from 35 to 21%. What happened? A bunch of corporations came back. We got lots of jobs as a result of it, because now 21% is below the worldwide average of 25% corporate tax. And that made people want to do jobs here. If Biden kicks it to 28, it won't be as bad as 35, which is what he had under Obama. It's still not good. Tax increases never help. And just by hiding them behind the evil, greedy corporations doesn't make any difference either. Those evil, greedy corporations have to make a profit or they go out of business. Remember, I said they can move things to cheaper places, they can stop pay raises. You know, they cut expenses a bunch of ways, but the ultimate choice is if they can't cut expenses and keep the prices competitive, they go out of business. So corporate tax increases are a bad thing. Everyone will see higher prices and lower wages. Now to the incredible stupidity of the week. Major League Baseball's All-Star Game shift from Atlanta to Denver. Now, they claim that the Georgia law is Jim Crow 2.0. Well, Joe Biden managed to get 4 Pinocchios from the Washington Post over his claims about the Georgia law. So let's look at some of the key claims here. Voter ID is going to suppress the vote. No, we know historically that voter ID actually increases the vote, and blacks want it even more than whites want it. Voter ID increases voter access. And what Georgia did was really cool. They said, look, if you don't have an ID, we'll give you one. But remember, you have to have an ID to buy cigarettes, alcohol, get on an airplane, get your COVID shot. You know, there's 1,000 things you do every day that require an ID. And to say that nobody can get an ID, oh, it's going to suppress blacks, is racist. It's saying blacks are too stupid to get IDs. That is being flat out racist. I'm sorry. Voter ID is just simply saying, you're going to have an ID. We all carry IDs. The details don't matter. We all have IDs. And one of the ways to avoid signature matching is really smart. You put your Georgia driver's license number on the ballot. If you do it and somebody else uses your number, that's going to come up as a conflict. Yeah, very quickly, you're going to have a problem with the absentee ballots. They're going to get kicked out right and left. And oh, by the way, if somebody uses a number that isn't real, that one will get kicked out too. That's pretty sweet. It's smarter than signature matching, which is open to all kinds of opinions. Does that match? Does it not match? Was he in a good mood? Was he in a bad mood? You know. And so you put that number down and you do good. Now, they moved the All-Star Game to Denver. Well, guess what? The Georgia law increased the number of days of early voting to more days than Colorado. So they moved it from a place that had expanded voter access to a place with less voter access. Makes perfect sense to me. Oh, and by the way, the commissioner of baseball, Manfred, he's a member of Augusta National Golf Club. That is a club which is primarily for rich white people. Rich white men. Yeah, you got a few non-whites and a handful of women. But at the same time, it's like 90+% white men. Commissioner of baseball is a member of this club. If he really meant what he said in switching this, he would resign from Augusta National. Oh, but it's too sweet a perk to be there. You can't ask to be a member of Augusta National. You have to be invited. And oh, he was important enough that he got invited. And we cannot forget that Stacey Abrams, who is the black former gubernatorial candidate who organized all the stuff that got Warnock and Ossoff elected to the Senate from Georgia, looked and said, don't take this out of Atlanta. We're going to lose $100 million, most of which is going to go to lower class blacks because they do all the concessions in the stadium, they manage the parking, you know, all of these other jobs. This game brings $100 million in to majority black Atlanta. But where did it go? It went to majority white Denver. Makes perfect sense to me. Let's go and finish the Georgia stuff. Georgia law now allows no excuse absentee voting. But guess what? Biden's home state of Delaware doesn't. Chuck Schumer's home state of New York doesn't allow it. You have to have a valid excuse to vote absentee. Georgia's new law says anybody can. You just request. Georgia also legalized ballot drop boxes. Now, there's some rules on where they are and how they're done so that they're secure. But guess what? Georgia will allow twice as many per capita as Biden's home state of Delaware. Oh, yeah. Georgia's law is Jim Crow 2.0. Joe Biden said we cut it back and you're cutting off voting at 5 o'clock. No, they're not. The voting hours are still the same. The polls close at 7 and can be extended to 8. And if you're in line at the close of voting, you get to vote, even if it takes 2 hours to get there. And then he says, Georgia won't allow you to get a drink when you're in line. Well, guess what? That's not what the law says. The law says you can go to a drinking fountain. They can set out a cooler with ice, bottled water, whatever. No big deal. What they block is an electioneering practice that's been around for a long time, which is we come in wearing our candidate's T-shirt and we give you donuts in the line and we give you soft drinks in the line, trying to encourage you to vote for our candidate. That is now banned. That's all that was banned, and a lot of states ban it. In other words, all of this hoorah about Georgia's voting law is a bunch of lies. And if anybody asks you, you now know the story, or send them here to this video. Until next time, take a look at those links below. Join me on Mewe or on Parler, the new non-censoring, non-tracking versions of Facebook and Twitter. But if you must use the old left-wing censoring versions, we're still on Facebook and at VidZet on Twitter. The message is what matters. I'm Dr. Ted Noel. Thanks for watching.